Steve has been a leader, been intricately involved in Des Moines and Iowa State University. Explain the perspective, why now, and why is this the right time?
Very good. Well, thank you. Pleasure to be here this morning. Last night, in preparation, I listened to 3 news stations, the weather stations. Each were estimating between 5 and 13 inches of snow, bringing into question whether or not we even have this event this morning. I got up, there was absolutely no snow on the ground. I just wish I could be part of a profession that got it right 50% of the time and still got a paycheck every year. This has started a long time ago, and one of my first involvements in the community was when Connie Weimer, who was at the back of the room, when she was chairing the Chamber of Commerce, way back when, asked me to do some work to try to bring a closer connection between Ames, Iowa State University, and Des Moines. Now, that's well over 2 decades ago, and it's been a long road, but we're patient and we're determined. And patience and determination, along with a little bit of skill, will get you a long way in life. This community is a great community in terms of strategic planning and then executing on their strategic plans. If you look back over the last 4 decades, this is the 4th strategic plan that we've had, Capital Crossroads. It was by far, of all 4 of them, the most aggressive in terms of scope. There were 12 different committees were appointed. The cultivation, well, it wasn't the Cultivation Corridor then, it was the Capital Corridor. And the idea was, 20 years later, can we bring a closer connection between Ames, Iowa State University on the corridor, and bring that relationship in the 2 economies together? And we'll have a marketing strategy. Really, it was a marketing program is what they had in mind. And when the group that came to me and asked if I would co-chair it said, and what we would really like to have is the new president. Hasn't been appointed yet, but the new president, when the new president is appointed, to serve as co-chair. And we didn't know it at that point, but that was to become Steve Leith. And if you know anything about university presidents, they have a big job managing the faculty. They're really not in charge, it's the faculty that's in charge. And so the first job is, when you get to a university, is to work and get to know your faculty. So I knew it was a large ask of time and commitment. And we met even before he started here getting a paycheck in Iowa. We flew to Iowa, we met one evening, we laid out the plans for what then was Capital Crossroads and what we might do, and certainly Cultivation Corridor wasn't even a dream then, and that night we talked. And now 3 years later, he agreed that night that he would serve without question. We were delighted, and we're really fortunate as Iowans to have Steve Leith here. He's an extraordinary president, he has infinite energy and determination and will, and that's why he's going to do a great job for the university, but also a great job for Cultivation Corridor. What we started out with was a clean cloth. First, we decided we'd go in a different direction. The assignment was develop a marketing strategy, and we decided we wanted to develop an economic development strategy. And so at center stage, we put economic development. That's growing companies, growing jobs. Marketing would be a part of it, but the key driver would be ultimately how we will be measured is how many jobs do we add, what's the capital investment. Next was, we had to give respect, and we did, to the marketing strategy. What would we brand ourselves in central Iowa? There were bold thoughts about, it needed to be something like Silicon Valley. That would be aspirationally where we wanted to be. We looked at a number of things. Could it be generic? It could be. That would be something under which would be a broad rubric. But we elected not to do that. We wanted to go specific. If we went specific, why not finance and insurance? Those were our core strengths were in our community. We decided not to do that either. We were contrarian, and we're running against the grain continuously. And these are high-risk strategies. What we observed is, if you looked at Iowa, if you looked at central Iowa, if you looked at the great science or the great next economic moves that would power the time, ag bioscience was probably it. Because in ag bioscience, you have an industry that needs to feed 9 billion people by 2050. We're running out of materials and renewable resources, but plants can really, they're little factories that can regenerate power, they can regenerate materials, food, energy, materials. Plants can do it all. And we had the core strengths. We had some of the best bioscience companies in the world, like Stein Seed, Pioneer Hybrid, and others. We also had great universities, and Iowa State University and its research capacity that also Drake University and a Drake Agricultural Law Center, DMAC, and others. So we had an educational infrastructure in place. But we had one other thing. In Iowa, we had the best production agriculture in the world. And it all fit together. And it was all right here, but others in Indiana, Missouri, and other states were thinking about the very same thing. So we wanted to pound our stake in the ground and claim it. The next task was, after we had the initial strategy was outlined, we needed a board of directors. We did something else different here again. Instead of just having Central Iowa Board of Directors, to be true to what we were trying to do, what we wanted was a broad-based board. And we went all over Iowa to get our board members, not just Central Iowa. And I'd like to read the names of some of the people that are here this morning. Craig Hill, Iowa Farm Bureau. And I'd like to, Craig, just stand up and be recognized, because Craig was one of the first to step forward. Took a little bit of courage for Iowa Farm Bureau to say, we're going to step forward for a major economic development for Des Moines. That didn't really seem core to the mission of, say, Iowa Farm Bureau, but he was one of the first that stepped up. Bob Riley, who's at the center stage of the core thinking, he was an aligned spirit in the area of ag bioscience. Mike Crum from Iowa State University, Catherine Kroonert are all board members that are with us this morning. But the chair of our board is not from Des Moines, he's John May, an executive, one of the top 4 executives of John Deere in the Quad Cities. The point being is, this is a Central Iowa initiative, but it's an all Iowa initiative. The last thing we needed to put in place to launch it, we raised a lot of money to get it started. We have a budget of around $750,000 a year, and we hired Brent Willett, an aggressive young man that is in the trenches on a day-to-day basis. Brent, would you please stand and be recognized? So that's our team. That's the history. That's how we got here. And I'll now turn it over to Steve Lee.
Thank you, Steve. I'm going to pick up from where Steve left off and talk about what our approach was since I arrived a little over 3 years ago, and some of the roles I think Iowa State can and should play in this project. When I came here, we took a very research-based strategic approach to developing the Cultivation Corridor brand, which I think was the right way. We needed to be methodical, we wanted to be inclusive, but we knew if we had 20 priorities, we wouldn't have any priorities, and we needed to work through a large slate to come to a conclusion that we could all get behind. So we talked to stakeholders from every industry in Central Iowa. Our research included a significant study of our target market, both inside the region and outside Central Iowa. And we spoke with business leaders and entrepreneurs from a number of sectors. We looked at laboratories, research facilities, other facilities, so we could develop a real comprehensive inventory of our assets. And at the same time, we were listening to people as we went around, and we heard a two-part theme, I think, fairly consistently. One was with regard to Central Iowa, the whole has never been greater than the sum of the parts, and we have never really spoken with one voice and maximized our potential in any one area. So as we looked at all our assets and we're trying to winnow this down to a target focus for the Cultivation Corridor, which wasn't named at the time, we also kept in mind that we had to deliver some value which was really going to be making the whole greater than the sum of the parts. We eventually came to the conclusion that the Cultivation Corridor was going to address several challenges, one being a sustainable food supply for a growing world, two, and these aren't in rank order or anything, new sources of energy, giving the U.S. More energy independence, and then creating jobs through a number of innovative products developed from renewable resources. We felt Iowa State needed to play and does play a significant role in these areas because we have incredible amount of expertise in agriculture, plant sciences, biofuels, and biorenewable chemicals. In addition, we have unusual state-of-the-art laboratories, some very unusual research facilities, and some expensive and unusual pieces of equipment that could add value to people wanting to come to this region. So we structured all this around 3 main goals. We wanted to be successful in growing the ag bioscience industry and the companies we already had in this region. We definitely wanted to attract new players to the region. And we wanted to create a ag bioscience innovation community or hub where we really had a lot of synergy and people were far better off together than separate. So how were we going to do that? We gave some thought to this, and Brent is the one that does this every day. But we needed to establish a solid foundation for the corridor by one, increasing awareness of its existence and making sure everybody knew what its efforts were doing in the state and in the region. We wanted to make sure people could see the Cultivation Corridor as a catalyst, a facilitator, and an enabler for both attracting new enterprises to the region and creating this innovation community in the area. So we did have this opportunity to create an immediate impact by recruiting companies here. And we felt that was going to be relatively high profile and attract people to the brand and understand what we were doing. But at the same time, we felt like the Cultivation Corridor's potential greater impact might be not in recruiting new companies, but in connecting all the players in this area and finding new ways for them to interact and benefit from each other's work. And if you go back and look at Silicon Valley and Boston, and especially the Research Triangle Park, which is known for this, collaboration really differentiated those regions from other regions all around the United States and made those areas highly successful. And the collaboration, especially in the RTP, fostered growth that most regions wanted to emulate and always struggled by looking at specifics and missed the collaboration piece. So we felt this is something the corridor could really contribute. As far as our role goes, we felt we also could have a key role and a bigger role and should take a greater responsibility in attracting companies to Central Iowa and facilitating this innovation community. In many ways, we're, as a university, I guess you could call us the center for the exchange of ideas and often the epicenter for the creation of a lot of these ideas through our research and our infrastructure on campus. And we take it as a primary responsibility as a land grant to do this research and deliver it. If our research sits on the shelf, we're not doing our job. So we have a responsibility to share our research. We take that seriously. We want to make sure that companies and societies can benefit from what we do. And we want to be viewed as not competition with any company that is in this region and wants to come, but as a true collaborator. So that being said, the executive director, Brent Willard, who was just introduced by Steve, works very, very closely with our Center for Economic Development and Industry Relations, headed by Mike Crum. That relationship between our economic development units, which are many on campus, and Brent has to be seamless. And one way we're making that seamless is the Cultivation Corridor offices will find space in our new Economic Development Core facility on our research park. And that way those folks will get up and see each every day, and they'll truly be colleagues. And it's going to make it easier for us to provide help to Brent, and it's going to keep the university fully engaged in the corridor as he's recruiting firms or developing other initiatives. I'd also say with our STEM focus, our whole university is well aligned with the needs of the Cultivation Corridor. We don't want to lose sight of the fact that our #1 product at the university is our students. We're right now placing 95% of our undergraduates within 6 months of graduation. This should be a huge attraction to companies that are here and want to grow and new companies that want to come, because we've got a tremendously well-trained workforce readily available that wants to stay in Central Iowa. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague.
Well, good morning, everybody. As was mentioned, my name is Jay Myers. I'm CEO of the Greater Moines Partnership. Jeanette, I like your scarf very much. I want you to notice the color of my tie. Make sure we're
I like the scarf.
I like them both. Well, first and foremost, thank you to the business record for hosting this and drawing attention to the Cultivation Corridor. This is a really big deal, and in many ways, the signature win of the Capital Capital Crossroads vision plan as a whole. And I first want to just start with, I don't know how many of you have even recognized this, but the business record for now a number of months, if you look at their tagline, it says, the Business Journal serving Central Iowa's Cultivation Corridor. So that means we must be doing something right. So I don't know how many people have recognized that, but thank you for helping us develop that brand. But that's already I consider that a signature win. So thank you for that, and thank you for hosting this today. The Greater Des Moines Partnership, I know most of you know quite a bit about us, but we are the regional economic and community development organization serving Central Iowa. We're currently doing economic development, helping lead economic development in 7 counties. We have 21 affiliate chambers of commerce, and we have now 5,300 regional members, which actually makes us the 4th largest regional chamber in the entire country right now, so we're pretty proud of that. Again, this is a big part of our work with the Cultivation Corridor. I know a number of you were at our annual dinner this year, and I thought it was kind of ironic that we call this the Power Breakfast Series. So if you remember when I got up and spoke, I said a lot of times when you come to events, you're told to power down, but we asked you to power up. And so I'm going to ask you all to power up again. And so if you're looking at your phones, I will not be offended. So if you're heavily engaged with social media, which I know a lot of you are, I encourage you to be engaged with social media throughout this, and we're going to use the hashtag Cultivation Corridor. If you remember at the annual dinner, we were trending on Twitter with Seize Des Moines, which was amazing. It was really a lot of fun, and again, social media is very, very powerful. So I encourage you to help tell the story, help us tell the story of the Cultivation Corridor, not only today, but throughout the day and when you go back. One of the handouts that we put on your tables is a one-pager front and back that Brent has put together. And there's all kinds of great facts about the Cultivation Corridor. Right? So there's lots of tweet-worthy material in there. So lots of great things to share with your networks. Also, I want to specifically thank some other folks. Some folks who have already been thanked. But there's a number of key people who I work with on a daily basis on this who have done some really incredible work. Brent Willett has already been recognized. We brought Brent on as the initial executive director. He's done a tremendous job in a very short amount of time. Definitely the right guy. I'm very, very proud of his work. And so let's give Brent a big round of applause for his work. There's a number of other key players on the staff level that work on this initiative a lot, a number of which are here. So I'm in no particular order. Dan Culhane, who is my colleague with the Ames Chamber and Ames Economic Development. This project never would have happened but for Dan. He staffed the Capital Crossroads Committee that looked at the, when we're just calling it the Capital Corridor. And quite frankly, the trust and friendship that's been developed between the Greater Des Moines Partnership and Dan and his team have been critical to making this happen. And again, when you're talking regionalism and economic development, there's a lot of trust, there's a lot of faith, and proud to call you a friend and a colleague. So Dan, thank you for what you've done. Some other folks real quick. Catherine Kunert with Mid-American Energy. She's been on our steering committee. She heads up the Partnership's Regional Economic Development. I know she's here. She's done a great job. David Moss, who heads up our Regional Economic Development efforts. Again, he's done a ton of work on this. Was formerly in Dan's position up in Ames, and so that connection has been key. Mike Crum, who was mentioned with Iowa State, has played a huge role with this initiative. And then also Gene Meyer, who is my partner in crime at the Partnership. As you know, he's very, very engaged with all things Iowa State, and his connections up there have been pivotal in making this happen. So thanks to all those folks. We wouldn't be here but for all of your work. Also, I see my friend Dwayne back there behind the camera. Make sure to wish Dwayne happy birthday today. So. A couple things real quick in terms of kind of how the Capital Crossroads Initiative came together, because I think it's really important in terms of where we're at right now. Christy Nouse, I don't know if I've seen Christy here or not, but before we were in our current roles, Christy and I, when she was at the foundation, before she was president, before I was CEO of the Partnership, were charged with helping put together the format for what eventually became Capital Crossroads. Steve Zumba had mentioned sort of a lot of the previous vision plans, all of which were excellent, very aggressive. A number of them had focused primarily on downtown. 2003 vision plan, the vision plan before Capital Crossroads focused on Polk, Dallas, and Warren County. And focused on some quality of life initiatives and was really bold. But we thought it was really important from the very beginning to spend a lot of time in terms of framing what Capital Crossroads, what that plan should be. And so we spent almost a year talking with other communities, talking with consultants, bringing people in just to make sure, because we knew that if we had the right people, if we had the right process and the right priorities, the plan would be good. And so we spent a lot of time with that. And Christy and I interviewed a lot of people, talked to a lot of people. But there were some very basic premises on the front end that we thought were very important. One was that definition of region, because we thought that was really important. And so as I said, the last vision plan we had was Polk, Dallas, and Warren County, and I like to say an upside down L does not make a region. When you look at regions, you got to look at where do people live, where do people work, where do people shop, what are those commuting patterns, where do people recreate, where do people enjoy arts and culture, how do people live? You know, people don't live according to political boundaries that were made at a time when it was determined how long it takes to ride a horse to and from the county seat, right? They don't live within city lines, they don't live within county lines, they live within regions. And just think how all of you live, right? I mean, we all live across those regions. And so we wanted to put a regional vision plan together that was for the region, that went beyond our political boundaries, and that went beyond, quite frankly, our organizational boundaries, because the partnership's sort of service territory doesn't necessarily match up to, perfectly with that either. And so we were very strategic in making sure that in that initial planning committee that we had representation from all those counties, regardless of whether they helped contribute to the funding for that, but we thought that was really, really important. We also wanted to make sure that we had really strong grass top strategy. And when I say that, we didn't want this just to be another business community plan saying, business community says you should do this, so this is the right thing to do. So there were a number of key folks that we brought in on the front end to really broaden that grass top. So that included the United Way, that included the Community Foundation, Iowa State, because one of our key elements was, as both Steves have said, is to really strengthen that connection between Iowa State, Ames, and Des Moines. In all of central Iowa. Also, we included Bravo in there, Prairie Meadows, the MPO to bring into Publix. Now CVB is engaged at that level as well too. But again, to really have that sort of broad section to cover a lot of different facets of central Iowa. And then three, it was really important to have a really strong grassroots. So we spent a lot of time with tons of focus groups, which I know a lot of you were part of. We did town meetings, we did online surveys that our consultant, that blew our sort of the consultant's record away in terms of input that they've had in previous plans. And then we came up with all this amazing data. And then the Capital Crossroads name came from actually Barry Griswold, former CEO of Principal, came up with the name. And so it's got a double meaning, so we're the capital of Iowa. And then we broke down all this sort of ideas into 10 different capitals. So physical capital, capital corridor, human capital, and so that's the double capital name. And the crossroads of 8035, and then as a community we're really at a big crossroads in terms of deciding where we want to go as a region. So that's where the name came from. In terms of, again, I can't stress enough that from the very beginning, to me the most important thing was, the whole plan was what we're talking about right now. It's what can we do to maximize what Iowa State and that R&D capacity can mean for the region. If you look at economic development across the country, being joined, a metropolitan region joined at the hip with a high-powered R&D institution is absolutely critical to success. And up the road we had the first land-grant institution in the country with this incredible R&D capacity, and we weren't leveraging that resource like we needed to. And so that's what this was all about, in terms of what can we do to strengthen that. And we knew if that happened, Capital Crossroads would be a success. So that is really our signature win about everything in Capital Crossroads from my perspective. So in terms of the Cultivation Corridor, there's kind of really three sort of strategies with it, all of which work together. There's the branding and marketing strategy. There's the strategic innovation, the R&D capacity, and in many ways led by Iowa State. And so those really have sort of statewide impacts. And then there's an economic development component that's also very important with this, and that's led by the partnership and Ames Economic Development in terms of that ability to attract other folks who are within this industry from across the world, really maximizing all those great assets so that we can make the case, like the Silicon Valley, that if you're in the ag bio space and you're not in central Iowa, you're missing the boat. And that's our message out to the world. And so we're very excited about that. We've had a lot of great wins in a short amount of time. And then finally, just as sort of a high-level sort of analysis from the partnership and some of the things that you've been seeing out of us, this really fits with a couple of different things. And so One of the things that had kind of bugged me about Central Iowa was that we were sitting on, there's some people in this town who used to say we don't want to be known as an ag town. There's people who said we don't want to be a sow town, plow town, or a cow town. And I'm like, and so my point was I grew up in rural Iowa, and I was like, we got this exactly wrong. We are sitting on the best resources in the entire country with production agriculture, #1, corn, beans, soy, eggs. We have these amazing ag bio companies, DuPont Pioneer, Chemin, Monsanto, right on down the line, lots of others. We have the oldest land grant institution in the country with high-powered R&D sitting right up the road. We have the world food price that we can see from our office. And there's people who want to run from that. That's like, we should run to that. We should be the future of agriculture, and that's what the Cultivation Corridor is all about. When I was CEO, when I was first named CEO, one of the first things I did, I went out and met with all the ag groups, and met with Craig, met with the Pork Producers, Corn Growers, Soybean Association, and brought that message to them to say, this isn't about rural versus urban, this is about how do we maximize this together. So this is really, in many ways, a culmination of what we're trying to do, and it's very, very exciting. And I know this isn't part of this, but I think this is, we chose to focus on ag bio for the Cultivation Corridor because that was the bond that really made the most sense for the greater region. And Dan and I talk about this a lot. There's great manufacturing in Central Iowa. Insurance and financial services is huge. Logistics, wind energy, technology companies. But this was the one that really we thought we could get a lot of power working together, and that's why we had that sort of laser focus. Also, that doesn't mean that we're still at the partnership not focusing on those other issues. And so another thing that's kind of bugged me in the past about Central Iowa is that people used to say, oh, you're just a sleepy, boring insurance town. And I was like, you guys are crazy. We got 80+ insurance companies here doing world-class business. We're the best in the world. Why are we ashamed of that? We should be proud of that. So we've really doubled down on those strategies too. You saw us launch the Global Insurance Accelerator last week. We announced second annual Global Insurance Symposium, and really the concept behind that is to be the bookend for the World Food Prize. So we have these two, which we think are best in class target industry sectors that instead of running from, we're running to, and we're maximizing that. So that's just a little bit of insight in terms of some of the stuff that you're seeing, and look forward to the continuing conversation. And again, thanks for being here. Hashtag Cultivation Corridor.
I guess I'm the last person that you're going to hear from before we get to all of your questions, and I think so. I want to say thanks as well for inviting us. I'm Dee Baird with the Economic Alliance. It's fantastic to be here. I've admired what's been going on in Des Moines and Ames for the last few years, and so to sit up here and tell you our story is a real honor for what we're doing. Our board chair is here, Lydia Brown with Ryan Companies, and so I want to make sure to recognize her right off the bat. But there's some other people in the room that have played into our success story thus far, and I want to make sure that some of these people may be in Des Moines, but they also are rooting for us in Eastern Iowa and Iowa's Creative Corridor as well. And Catherine Kuhnert comes to mind as one that has helped us a great deal, even though she's been helping you as well. So I grew up in Iowa. I feel like this is coming back to my roots. I grew up in Eddyville, Iowa, and as a kid, it was a big darn deal when we got to go to Des Moines as a family. And I did my undergraduate work at Simpson, and I have a master's.
Go Simpson.
Jay's younger than I am, though. That's the unfortunate part. So, and I have a master's and PhD from Iowa State. So, so even though I've spent the last 20 years in Cedar Rapids, I have watched and been part of I've been part of for many years this area, and loved it, and watched affectionately with what you all have accomplished. And kudos to you for where you're going. And just 3 weeks ago, we brought 30 of our leaders over and spent an entire day with Jay's team and Dan's team to better understand kind of the success that you've had. So, so know that there's mutual admiration here, and particularly we want to learn from what you've achieved. So I have 3 minutes to tell you what we've done in the last 20 years. So hang on. I was trying to figure out how I was going to frame this up for you. We've had 2 brands in Cedar Rapids, Iowa City region, and we started with the Technology Corridor. And interestingly enough, how we determined the Technology Corridor almost 20 years ago was for the purpose of marketing ourselves regionally for new business recruits. That was the sole strategy of the technology corridor. And I can tell you, I was sitting in the room when they made that decision, and it was leaders from the Iowa City Area Development Board and leaders from our legacy organization, Priority One, that said, we've got to market ourselves as a region, and that we'll have greater success if we do that. And so we got to come up with a brand. There was no expertise in terms of branding in the room. We did not hire a firm. The leaders just said, you know, let's try to figure out what the common denominator is, and it was that at that time, we had worked hard to diversify our industry base and wanted to continue to do that. And really what we were known for is a lot of our facilities, they were using the highest technology in their field. And that's why they picked the technology corridor, and we just took off. And the backlash from that was we didn't bring the whole region together. And there were people and other leaders in various aspects, particularly in arts and culture, that said, what's the technology corridor? That doesn't really represent us very well. But the leaders pressed on. So fast forward to 2008. And in all seriousness, this really did have a major impact on how we came to Iowa's Creative Corridor today. And that is that both ends of our corridor went through a major disaster, the flood of 2008. And if any of you have ever gone through a natural disaster at that level, it changes your thinking about who you are and your future considerably. You can't see it necessarily when you're in survival mode, but it's really the impetus and the catalyst for kind of how we came out of it and where we're headed. So Cedar Rapids went through the flood, but the University of Iowa got hit hard in that flood, and so did Coralville. So interestingly enough, those of us that were focused on the regional development, we lost sight of kind of the momentum we had going regionally during that time period. After the flood, everyone was in survival mode and really hunkered down to do what they had to do to bring each community back. And Chuck Peters with Source Media Group, the Gazette, and John Lohman with the Corridor Business Journal care about the region. Interestingly enough, as in my previous role at Kirkwood, I brought a lot of the chambers and economic development groups together to try to at least get us, talking, work the relationships, and move it forward. Well, interestingly enough, we were trying to do this separately, and so Chuck and John came to Mick Starcevich, our president at Kirkwood, and said, we need to get, this is 15 months after the flood, we need to get the region back on track, and we need your help. And so, what does a good president do? They delegate and said, okay, we'll give you D, and so that's what we did. So we pulled an event together in November of 2009, about 16 months after the flood, called A Path to Regional Excellence. And we had 350 people in the room. We brought Michael Langley in, who was our keynote speaker, and he gave us the framework of what we should focus on. He spent 2 days in the region, helping us assess kind of our current mindset. So it was a great success, but then those of us that sat around the table looked at each other and said, well, now what? Okay, so we've had this great event, we know that there are regional champions, we've got a framework, but now what? So a month later, we brought Michael back, and we brought 40 stakeholders into a room at Kirkwood, including President Mason and Mayor Corbett and a lot of our private sector leaders. And we said, we've got to work at this together. And we came up with 3 strategic imperatives that we needed to advance. We needed a regional brand and image that really defined us, the whole region. That was our goal. And we needed to implement it. We wanted to develop and implement a regional economic development plan. And then the third part of that was we knew that flood recovery was going to take a lot longer than 15 months. And so we collectively agreed that we had to achieve full flood recovery as a region together. And that's what took us off on our path of regional brand that's now Iowa's Creative Corridor. It took us 2 years just to come up with our brand. We vetted different firms, local and national. We hired North Star out of Nashville. Don McCann, who leads that company, came into our region a couple of times, and one of the key questions we asked him is, Don, what's it going to take to really develop a brand and implement it? And he said, well, there's 3 things you got to pay attention to. We're all at the edge of our seat saying, what are those 3 things? And he said, politics, politics and politics. And I'm telling you, it's taken us 4 years, fits and starts, just to come up with what that brand was going to be and get consensus around it. And then the implementation phase, we're still, in my opinion, at step 1 and 2. And it's, 4 years later. So this is tough work, it's not easy, but our brand has gone from a very strategic purpose of recruiting businesses to how do we bring 460,000 people in our region together that they feel as individuals, this is kind of, that they contribute to our region's success. So Iowa's Creative Corridor strapline is, Iowa's Creative Corridor is where imagination drives innovation. And I know I'll have the chance to talk a little bit more about how many entrepreneurs we have in our region and all the various types of industry have, where they've contributed in terms of some of the success that we've had, but it really starts with the person and that anything's possible, and it's that imagination that's created so much success for us.